Let's take a closer look at the decrepit, struggling, barely functioning guy in the White House who sees apparently Jim Crow around every turn. Remember Joe Biden? He once called African Americans predators on our streets. He worried that his precious children would grow up in integrated schools that he referred to as, quote, racial jungles, his words. He bragged that his home state of Delaware was, quote, my state's a slave state, he said. He worked hand in hand with America's most notorious racist to block the integration of our schools and busing. Robert Byrd, the former Klan leader, was Biden's mentor in the Senate. According to Joe and the rest of the Democratic Party, none of that matters. And now, according to Joe, millions of Americans are worse than Jim Crow, all because they support simple election integrity measures. Watch for yourself.
21st century Jim Crow assault is real. It's unrelenting. There's an unfolding assault taking place in America today, an attempt to suppress and subvert the right to vote and fair and free elections. The assault on free and fair elections is just such a threat, literally. I've said it before. We're facing the most significant test of our democracy since the Civil War. That's not hyperbole. Since the Civil War.
Since the Civil War. Joe probably remembers the good old days, I guess, in his life. He served, what, Delaware? How many years at this point? Let's break this down for you. According to Joe Biden, America is facing its worst crisis since the Civil War because of the Texas election bill. Look at your screen tonight. This bill bans paid ballot harvesting. You have a problem with that? It requires voter ID for mail-in ballots. Alternatively, voters can provide the last 4 digits of their Social Security number if they prefer. The bill sets uniform times for early voting, all while expanding early voting hours on the weekend. It ensures that poll watchers are able, according to law, observe vote counting. Start to finish, all sides get to observe. It strengthens the ban on unmanned mail-in drop boxes so nothing nefarious can happen. Keep people honest. It gives voters an opportunity to correct mistakes on mail-in ballots if they're discovered. The bill requires those assisting voters with filling out their ballots to complete a form verifying their identity, and it ends the temporary emergency measures that were put in place because of the pandemic, like drive-through voting and 24-hour early voting. Joe Biden quite literally is calling this bill the most racist thing to happen in the United States this century. All right, pretty insane, especially when you consider this simple fact. Because of this bill, it is now easier to vote in Texas than in Joe Biden's home state of Delaware. That's why he's now weaponizing his own Department of Justice to go after Atlanta. They have far more accessibility to voting than Delaware. And in the state of Texas, there are 2 weeks of early voting. In Delaware, there are 0 weeks of early voting. In Texas, there are drop locations for absentee ballots. In Delaware, well, drop boxes, well, they're not required. Both states require voter ID. But in his, 5,000-plus years representing the great state of Delaware, Joe not one time ever voiced any concern whatsoever about his own state's restrictive election laws. Never, not once. Instead, he was too busy saying things like, well, this.
Madam President, we have predators on our streets.
The largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
What kind of a chance would a northeastern liberal like Joe Biden stand in the South?
Better than anybody else. And you don't know my state. My state was a slave state.
We got the first sort of mainstream African American who was articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
The guy that tried to slow integration of our schools, eulogized the former Klan leader, called Obama the first articulate and bright and clean African American. This is storybook, man. Those are Joe's words. Now, that guy, Joe Biden, he's going to lecture the country about racism? Really? Now, allow me to state a fact that might surprise Joe Biden. Americans, regardless of their race or gender, they're capable, intelligent human beings. I have faith in the American people. We don't always win the elections we want to win. But you know what? We come back. Conservatism always makes its way back because it works. Now, way before COVID, before all of the mass mail-in ballots and the 24-hour drive-through voting centers and the weeks and weeks of early voting, African-American turnout was actually reaching record levels. Now, in fact, it was a study, according to the Associated Press, even printed in the Washington Post, that African-American voters turned out at a higher rate than white voters in 2012 and in 2008. But Texas Democrats, they don't appear interested in facts. Grandstanding is far too important to them. And so Democratic lawmakers, they fled their state in order to prevent a quorum and thereby temporarily blocking a vote on this legislation. Earlier this week, they boarded their private jet. No masks in sight, just a sidebar, and are now enjoying a lavish vacation in Washington, D.C., complete with speeches and selfies and partying and tweets about what they're eating. Kamala Harris called the trip courageous, in line with the brave actions of Frederick Douglass. Watch.
I had an extensive meeting yesterday with, I think, some of the most courageous elected leaders that we could know at this moment. I said it yesterday, and I'll say it again. They took bold, courageous action in line with the legacy of everyone from Frederick Douglass, who's over my right shoulder, when he fought for the right of black men to vote in America, to the legacy that includes all those women who marched down Pennsylvania Avenue for women's right to vote, to all of those folks who shed their blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge to make sure that we would, in 1965, pass the Voting Rights Act.
Now, Mitch McConnell, Republican colleagues skipped town to prevent a quorum in the U.S. Senate. Let's see how Kamala Harris reacts then. Would they call them courageous? Will she be calling Republicans courageous? I tend to doubt it. So what is this really all about? We all know there is nothing racist about integrity in elections. Democrats are obviously worried. Chances are they now believe they probably will lose in 2022 and maybe even 2024. Their Green New Deal socialist policies are deeply unpopular. They're defunding the police, dismantling police, reimagining police policies are similarly deeply unpopular. The guy that they put in the White House is becoming less and less coherent, seemingly by the hour. So now they are frantically searching for ways to expand voting by any means necessary, all while setting up an excuse for an impending loss. Mark my words, if Democrats suffer huge losses in 2022, they will blame racist, right-wing voter suppression. Mark these words down. Per usual, it's all a lie, but the truth isn't important to the Democratic Party or the media mob for that matter. Power is all that matters. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.